How's it going, John Lee?
Um, I've started seeking again. I think it all started with the whole thing with the LU. Um, Christian saying that a shift needs to happen, and I didn't find a shift. But I'm nearly finished her book, or yeah, kinda. And she just basically says, just keep looking. Um,
Keep looking for?
the South, because yeah. Mm.
So do you remember my watermelon analogy?
Yes.
Right. So what is the point of keeping on going back to the fridge when you know there's not one there?
Um, I think because I still suffer. Oh, one sec. Yeah, suffering still happens. Um,
Okay, describe your suffering for me.
I think just moments of like, oh, why did I do that? Regret,
And
regret.
and regret. Yeah. So stories about that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see those stories as stories when that happens? Or are you just lost in those stories?
I I do the practice of like just feeling that sensation that comes up of like the wincing sensation.
Yeah, yeah. So for what purpose do you do that?
Yeah, right. Um, to release it.
Right. Okay. Wrong reason, of course.
Right.
Right. The reason for doing that is to see what provoked it, what it sits on top of, not to finish it. In fact, you don't want it to finish until you see the reason why it's there. So why is there a story that it should be different? Where did that one come from? What belief do you imagine that might be based on? That if you were enlightened, that wouldn't be happening?
If I was enlightened, the the what do you call it? The purging process wouldn't bother me.
Hmm. So can you see the circular nature of this?
Yeah,
Because it bothers you, that means I'm not enlightened. That's why it bothers me, because I'm not enlightened.
right.
Now, now look, this is the thing. What I don't want to say is Christiana's wrong. I have no idea. I don't know where she comes from. I don't know about that stuff, right? Let's face it, the whole idea of anybody being enlightened is just a load of crap. It's just, what there is a change in our perspective, the way we look at life. Right? And if there are still triggers that cause suffering, then there's stuff to look at. Now, at what point do you say, oh, this is crazy. I don't know how to put this. At what point do you say, I don't have that perspective? I don't have the perspective required to recognize that something needs looking at. I don't have the tools to do that. And if we say, is that perspective and are those tools a hallmark of being awakened? Well, that's a stupid question. We don't need to worry about whether we're awakened or not. All we need to look at is, do we have the perspective? And when suffering happens, do we have the tools to look at it? And the whole story about whether that means we're awake or not awake is totally irrelevant. It doesn't fit with anything, does it?
I think I go to all the maps to complete enlightenment, such as the fetters.
So
Um,
you've got an idea about a complete when you get really awake, when you're really, really
yeah,
actually, yeah,
yeah.
there, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, okay, that's right. I have a story that says maybe, just maybe, this idea of full enlightenment is actual. But you know what? I'm going to have to wait to find out. And maybe I'll die before I find out. Maybe I'll never actually know whether it's real or not, or whether it was always just a story. But you know what? I don't really care. So I don't have to pursue it. Right? So I had an experience the other day that gives me something to look at. Do I get lost in a story that says, oh, because that happened, that means I'm not awake and I don't have the tools to look at it and I don't recognize that it was something that could be looked at? Or do I just get on with life and go, well, I'll look at that when the opportunity arises? And I had the fantasy a bit earlier today that tomorrow morning at the FEDA meeting is probably when I'll look at it because I'll get help. Won't be because of a fetters, but it'll just be because there's a bit of expertise there that can help me. But not for a moment did it occur to me, oh, I must not be awake because that happened. I mean, these things happen to me once every couple of months, and they will continue to happen until they don't. And maybe I'll never ever get to the point where they don't. Maybe. Who knows? Am I concerned about that? I'm not. Not in the slightest bit am I concerned about that. If this is the way life is going to be for me for the rest of my life, I'm okay with that. I'm 77 in a few weeks. You know, I've probably got at best. I've probably got, if I live to be 100, which is very unlikely, I've got 23 years of life left. If I, you know, a lot of people die before they get to my age. If I die when I'm 80, that's only 3 years away. If I die tomorrow, you know, I don't really care. It doesn't matter, you know. So life is not. What is the point of me going? Oh, I've got to get somewhere before I die. That's only going to induce suffering. Why are you hitting yourself on the back with a barbed wire whip? I'm not.
We love to do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, some of you deserve it. Yeah. Not me though, not me. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, look, I mean, you know, see, I didn't suffer for 10 years after I woke up. I mean, after the initial doubts went away, I mean, so let's wipe out the first years, and then there was 9 years of feeling pretty good about life, you know. But I lost it on a fairly regular basis. You know, my wife could easily trigger me into a state of of anger. But it lasted, in the beginning it lasted a few minutes. In the end it lasted a few seconds, and it was gone. And it was like, okay, that's just shit that turns up. So there was no suffering involved with it. If you want to call the moment the momentary intense anger suffering, well, you could, but it didn't feel bad. It was just happened. It was like a little explosion and away it went, And then I discovered the fetters, and boy, I started seeking again. I thought, I got to fix that stuff. And that went on for, God, probably a month before I went, what am I doing? What am I doing to myself? And I've discovered a few things since then. And I reckon I'll probably keep on discovering things, and I'll keep on working on them and looking at them. And, it's no big deal if they don't resolve. If they do, that's good. I think what Christiana's saying is that if you're going to work through the fetters in a linear fashion, which she is very much into, then you need these hallmarks to say, well, let's now focus on the next fetter. And that's what the shift is about for her. I've worked with lots and lots of people that have not had a big epiphany, and yet they still go through life with the right perspective and the right tools that I would say is waking up, and they're not seeking. So yes, we can stimulate that seeking again, but it's just an old habit that's popped back in, that's all. So change the seeking mode into discovery mode. Be the explorer that puts yourself in the way of discovering stuff. Life's a lot easier that way and a lot more pleasant than being out there with your magnifying glass and Sherlock Holmes hat on going, I've got to find this, I've got to find this, I've got to find this. That's just crazy bullshit. And it's going in the wrong direction as well. Because when you're a seeker, you're moving away from being awake, not towards it.
Right. I think I don't catch the thought in time thinking, oh, I don't want this to happen. I miss that thought, and then I spiral out. Yeah, because at the moment I've got 3 things in mind that I need to do. I need to do that one thing where you said, oh no, it was David said, just feel the emotion. So like, say my unworthiness, my dad's disappointed in me. And then when that happens, I feel the emotion. That's the one thing that the practice. The other practice was, now I got to do that desire, that gap thing, experience the pull, get in the gap, and then discover who's pulling. That's the other practice. And that's like, oh, that's more work. And then the other one was just, oh, maybe I should just start meditating now. And then the question arises, why? But then when you were talking, I was like, oh, I've missed that thought of, I don't like this. That's the thought. And then I got lost in it. Is it just a matter of catching to regress in that manner?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind, but if that thing about your dad, if that is what Pernilla would call a toxic starting point, And if that is pervasive and reoccurring and other things sit on top of that, then that's the domino we need to tumble. That's, if we push that over, a whole lot of other ones will go with it.
How do you push it over?
Looking at it. But you already see it. You already know it's there.
Yeah.
You acknowledged it already, you know. So my question is it is it is it um is it embedded? Is it shadow work that you need to do, or is it something way, way less than that? Is it simply a habit that you've developed over time? Now we don't know the answer to that except by looking at it. Now
If I
when
look,
yeah, go on.
if I look at it now, it's just a story that I remember when he went overseas to meet relatives, and I didn't have a job then. And then he said they would ask him, "How's John Lee doing?" And then he felt ashamed.
Yes, yeah.
That's the story.
And that made you feel how? Made you feel
Uh,
guilty? Made you feel ashamed?
Yes,
Mm-hmm. And
but
is that,
it's all propped up on story.
yep, yep, yep. And is that the whole of it? Does it all rest on that particular incident? Is that, or does that, how can I put it? Does that showcase a whole lot of other stuff? Is it all, that a good representation of other experiences that you've had? So if it's really shadow work, it's going to go back a lot further than that. What you see that, because you were old enough to have a job when he went there, so it was a case of, you know, it shadow work starts as an infant. You know, that gets embedded and carried in the body as an infant. So before that, what's the earliest you can imagine you were, the youngest you can imagine that you were, when you recognized that he felt ashamed of you? Was it that particular incident, or was there stuff before that?
It's, my dad's not coming up in this picture. It was more maybe that it's the idea of like I don't fit the archetype of a male.
Yep. Okay.
And that's the one.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that can go. Yeah. Now that would presume that would become an issue around puberty. So anything earlier than that?
No, nothing's coming to mind.
Okay. So we're not talking about a toxic starting point. We're talking about habit. We're talking about stuff that's just been there in your life
Okay.
when you were a young adult, basically. If we call it 12-year-old or on thereabouts, the beginning of adulthood, it'll do. Yeah. So it doesn't take much for you to realize that that is just a story.
Hmm.
Right? And as much as it was very real for your dad in his experience when he went overseas, it's because of his stories about the way his offspring should be to give him credibility with the relatives. That's his story, isn't it? Right? It's really got nothing to do with you. But because of you, perhaps, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, saying because you want him to like you, you want his approval, you would like to be the way he wants you to be in order to be approved of. He wants you to be a man, have a real job, do things that he thinks you should do. That's his story, though. That doesn't relate to you, does it? Right? But you've adopted that story. You've taken it on yourself. And it's fairly deeply ingrained because it's been going on for, well, how old are you now?
37.
37. Okay, it's been going on for quite a while then, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been going on for 25 years. Yeah, or whatever. So you can see how that kind of thing becomes a habit. You can see how you constantly see the world from that perspective. Now, it's not that we're going to say that's just a load of rubbish, because it's very real for your father. It's very real for a whole lot of the world, but it's not real for you or me. But for you, it's recognized as just a story that people have. But stories are important because we respond to them. And if you respond to that particular story with a feeling of, I'm not enough, that affects your life. That affects the way you are. And that causes you to have spontaneous responses to certain situations. So the way out of that isn't to get out of it, but rather to welcome it when it turns up as an opportunity, to welcome it as an opportunity to recognize how you've been conditioned. So when we talk about liberation, we're really talking about being liberated from the conditioning, being liberated from the compulsory behavior that society insists upon. That's what liberation is about. And it doesn't mean we don't do it, but if we do it, it means that we do it for a reason other than duty. It's no longer compulsory duty. Right, now, how do we get out of that? We recognize it when it turns up. So what these habits for you represent is an opportunity when they turn up, an opportunity to recognize them for what they actually are. They're a story, a culturally accepted story for sure, but they're a story that affects the way we feel about things. And when you recognize that one of those has turned up, the best way to move in the direction that will break that habit is to acknowledge it. Acknowledge it big time. Laugh it. Laugh. When you get the recognition that you've been lost in a story like that, you laugh. You thank it for turning up and you laugh. And that will very quickly retrain your brain out of that habitual response pattern. Now, I reckon if you focus on that one thing alone, don't meditate. And well, if meditating happens, that's fine. Meditate on that, but don't go looking for things to do, because looking for anything to do is a way of escaping this stuff. Our brain will tell us, our mind will tell us, oh yeah, this is a way to fix it. It ain't a way to fix it. It's a way to avoid it. And so you do whatever turns up to be done, but you do it with awareness. You look at it from the outside, what it is that is here to be done. So if meditation turns up, then meditate. Meditate on that. Whatever, anything that turns up, you do it, and just be aware that that's what's happened. And if that stuff turns up, then make a big deal of it and celebrate it. Thank you for coming along, and laugh. Ha 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 ha, fake it. Laugh in a faking way is fine. And what you'll do is you'll start to change your habits, your brainwave, your brain pathways. That's a big deal. Yeah. And you don't need to go back to Theta 1 and look for a shift. That's just total bullshit. Yeah. You had a shift, right? You've been there. You've been in the flow, haven't you? You've experienced that ease of moving through life. Well, that's different to the way you were. So you call that a shift. It just didn't happen in a compressed way that you can call an epiphany. Right? It kind of snuck up on you. And that happens all the time. You know, and I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of people wake up since I've been working at LU for 13 years. And I tell you, those who have a big epiphany, have a big shift, I'll guarantee, you know, within 6 months, they're looking to work through their doubt. It doesn't matter. Having that shift is just one thing, you know, it's not. So they're always going to be looking after that to integrate and to work through what stuff that comes up afterwards. And there'll always be stuff that comes up afterwards. And when you get through the 10th feta, there'll still be stuff there. You know, look at Ajasheti. He saw through the 10th feta and got sick. Yeah. It happens to everyone. This old idea, it's weird, isn't it? It's just weird. You know, I mean, I thought I was going to be able to walk on water when I got enlightened. And then I realized that that was just a joke. But you know what? That stuff still hovers around regardless. It's really, really deep conditioning, the magic that we expect from this. And that's where doubts rest on too, because, oh, okay, I haven't got that magic. That must mean blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's enough of a rant from me.
Thanks, Vint. I think maybe one more sticking point. It's kind of blurry to me. It's kind of like, say something's showing up in experience. I think I'm labeling that thing, say like, I don't know, a bodily sensation. It's like, since it's showing up here, it's mine.
Mm.
But I know that mine thing, that's just a label. It's just showing up here. But then I still, since it's showing up, I still say it's mine.
Well, yeah, saying it's one thing, but if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that it's a bit more than just a saying, that there's that kind of a sense of ownership of it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Why is it showing up
No, that's
for
not the
me?
question. Why is it showing up? No, that will. I mean, you know, I read somewhere the other day, somebody said, I don't remember who it was now, somebody said it takes about 9 years to work through the fetters. You know, now I don't know what that means, but what I'm saying is it takes a long time for this integration to happen. So those things don't, they stop appearing, stop the idea of it. I can see, this is a really, really hard one to get across, but I can still create a sense of self, but I recognize that it's an intentional story creation thing that I come up with, where I start to look at the logic of what I'm describing, you know. So if I was to say I'm talking, it's this it's even hard to do. Okay, look at it this way. The analogy that I use, go to the magician show and watching him saw a woman in half, right? You know it's an illusion. How many times do you have to go and sit in the audience and watch him sawing that woman in half before you don't think, or before your senses stop telling you that he's sawing a woman in half? You could go 50 times and it'll still look like he's sawing a woman in half, unless you go and find out how he does the trick. But whenever you just go to the audience and watch, it'll always look like he's sawing a woman in half. That's an illusion. That's what illusion is. It's your senses telling you one thing that your head tells you is not true. So it's you believing the thoughts that come from the sense, come from it's the logical conclusion that the thoughts apply to the physical sensations. And that logical conclusion is, because I'm having the experience of these sensations, it must be me. That's the story component of the sensation. And you're believing that. That's a logical conclusion, right? If you go and look at the sensation that you're talking about as me, you can find no evidence of me. All you can find is a sensation. It is the story attached to that comes to the conclusion that it's a me. So it's obvious that it's an illusion. But somehow that particular illusion has more stickiness than a lot of others.
So say I feel uncomfortable, and I can't pinpoint what it is. I just feel uncomfortable. Is the problem not the uncomfortability? Is the problem the thought, I don't want to feel uncomfortable?
Absolutely. So if you go with just the feeling of being uncomfortable, right, you recognize that uncomfortable is the label you're applying to this not so pleasant sensation. Right? If you were to do that exercise and chase down the sensation, you would recognize that sensation is not what's telling you it's uncomfortable. Right? It's the stories attached to it that tell you it's uncomfortable. The stories that say it shouldn't be here, that maybe it can end, whatever. If you were to get, this is something you've got to experience. It's rather, no amount of talking about it is going to bring you this one, but it is really, it's subtle and very much worthwhile looking at. You can get to an unpleasant sensation and get really close to the sensation, and as the stories drop off, that the experience of that sensation will change, and it won't be unpleasant. You wouldn't describe it as pleasant, but it will simply be a sensation. Now, as I say, that's a weird one, and it's really, you've got to experience it to get to it. And there's no way you can describe that sensation, because we're just limited to labels like pleasant and unpleasant. But the weirdness of that sensation, you wouldn't call pleasant or unpleasant if you get close enough to it to drop off all the labels. Right? So there is no problem, but what there is that constant idea that we can end this. So so that takes me into another little soapbox of mine. Let me jump up and have this quick rave. Whatever turns up is whatever turns up. No matter what it is, no matter how you describe it, No matter what your response to it is just what it is, just what it is, and it's nothing more unless you add story to it.
I just had an epiphany. I think I still have control,
Right.
even if it's the control of releasing all this emotion.
Mm.
It's like all this emotion comes up. I've got control in how to not feel this ever again.
Yep. Yeah.
That's sticky.
Okay. So there, that again. So what does it rest on? What does that sit on top of?
Right.
Okay. So the idea is that it is possible to change that. That's what it rests on.
What's that? The emotion or the
Whatever it is you don't like, whatever it is
right.
you think shouldn't be there.
Okay.
Right. But here's the thing. When I'm saying what it is, what it is, what it is that by the time you become aware of it, it's finished.
Mm.
Right? It might turn up again a second later, but by the time you're aware of that, it's finished. So what is the consequence of thinking that it could be different when it's already done?
Suffering.
Suffering, of course. And it's going to fuck up the next experience, isn't it?
Mm.
And so, see, experience, now here's another really interesting one. Experience seems to, by just the word experience, it seems to have continuity, but nothing has continuity. Nothing starts and nothing ends. And when it's here now, it's different to when it's here now. Because now is not a time between the past and the future, and it has no duration now. It's an instant, but it's not an instant because an instant requires a past and a future as well. So it's not even that. It's just absolutely nothing that you can bottle, nothing that can be found. It's like a thought. It appears out of unknown, it's there and it's gone. How long does it stay for? It has no duration. There is no continuity. So we talk about being in the flow, and that gives you the impression that there's continuity. But being in the flow is actually a place where there is no past or future. There is no ongoing anything. It is just unencumbered. That'll be the best way to describe being in the flow. So there's nothing wrong. Whatever turns up, there's nothing wrong. Anything that turns up, good or bad, is an opportunity. But it's an opportunity for what? It's not is it's if the idea then turns up, well, I'll look at that. That idea is gone before it finishes. It's finished before it starts. It's gone. It's there. It's gone. What are we going to look at? That's there and gone as well. But see, this is the really weird thing. We can't really describe our experience as a person because there's nothing to describe. Our experience is not anything. Whoa, we're getting into really woo-woo stuff here. So how can we pin anything down? How can we describe anything? How can we capture anything and say it's good or bad? So whatever turns up for you, so back to practical stuff, whatever turns up for you is something that is an opportunity for you to look at. And it may never turn up again, or it may. We don't know. But they can have a certain kind of stickiness about them, certain feeling that says, yeah, it'd be good to look at that. That's telling me something that is, well, that seems to be enduring. Right? So although there is no past or future or ongoing stuff, there is stuff that we seem to hang on to, but we can't really describe it or explain it because it's not, but it's just the feeling we have, just the way of saying it. So everything's a metaphor is another way to put it. So if there is that habitual way of doing things, we can look at the nature of what a habit is, the nature of a reoccurring thing. But every time we get close to looking at it, it's going to shift and morph and disappear on us. So we don't really want to look too close at these things that reoccur. We want to just get close enough to be able to look at what they rest on. And then when we look at that, the whole thing will just fall apart. I guess that was all a bit confusing, wasn't it? That was a bit.
No, it's good. Like you took me to the absolute view, but then it kind of coincides with the relative view as well, and that's when we start playing this game of, oh, I
Yes.
need to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, well put. Well put. That was good. That was clearer than what I was saying. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I take the middle path if that's the right way. Take no path.
Yeah. Yeah. Just watch. Just watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And when things seem to be an issue, don't dismiss them. When things come up, you don't go, "Oh, it's just a story," and piss off. You know, because it's all story. Yeah. So you go, "Oh yeah, that was interesting." Mm.
Cool.
I might just talk Vince about a couple of things that come up for me this week.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of work related in this new job, and I noticed when I have let's call it the belief or the feeling or the sensation, I'm good. It's really empowering, and it gives life energy, and your energy improves, and your mood improves, and you're happier, and you're more in the world. And all it takes is an event that I believe I got right, and it's like, yeah, I'm good, as opposed to I'm no good, There was a different time then during the week in work where I was just walking along at lunchtime with a couple of people, and there was a real low sense of, oh, I'm just useless. I'm just no good. I'm just playing here and I don't know what I'm doing. And they're all doing their thing and they're serious and they know what they're doing. And I'm just faffing around, and I felt really low. And it's just the contrast of the two things is really shocking. And it's all inside me. And then I was watching people in work, and I was watching projects and what was happening, and when people weren't doing what they said they would do, and I was finding it, well, I was managing it, but finding it frustrating and wanting things to happen and to be resolved and to get done and the project to move on with the role I was playing in that moment, like a project manager role, for want of a better way of describing it, the judging and it's that conflict between allowing everything to be and pushing. And in a way, it feels paradoxical because there's a freedom in that pushing and controlling and playing the role, as opposed to trying to be spiritual about it, which feels false. And the energy that comes with it, but then checking in with other people. Is this okay? Is this okay? And there was one scenario where I was worried about a vendor kind of not being upfront with money. And there was a contract that I'd agreed that all costs would be borne by them, except for one cost we would bear. And then there was this other thing coming up that was not costed, and they didn't put it in the contract, but now it was turning into a substantial amount of money. And I had said it to a colleague, and he thought, no, it'll be only a small amount. It's not a big deal. And I said, well, we don't know these guys, and what if it is a big amount? And as soon as we hung up the Teams call, an email popped in, and it was going to be a big amount. And he rang me back, fuck's sake, you were right. And I said, yeah, I had a feeling. I'm just, it's our new engagement, but it's how much I push me and do me versus not want to rock the boat, and it's connected with this. When you do stuff, you feel I'm right, you feel good, but then if you want to feel good about being right, you're going to have to feel bad about being wrong. So I don't know why I'm saying this, but there's something there.
Yep, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get that. An interesting point that comes up for me here is that, there is no difference between feeling good about being right or feeling bad about being wrong. It's the same thing. They achieve the same purpose exactly. And it all gives substance to a self. And they're all escaping from a belief about that self that you don't like. I say that in a general way, and that's a bit gross, but there are subtleties involved. So the difference between feeling joy about something going right and, say, disappointment about something going wrong is quite different to getting an ego boost when something goes right or punishing yourself when something goes wrong. Totally different things. You get that? So joy when something goes right and disappointment when something goes wrong, very roughly, I would describe that as a body response, right? And it's not about the idea of self. But if you get a little bit of puffery going on when it goes right, then that is about the self. And if you get a bit of self-flagellation going about something going wrong, that's also about the self. And there's no difference between the two. So there are subtle things to look at there in that one.
That really resonated what you said, that it's a body response, and especially when you get it right. There is a body response, a bodily, energetic sort of shift and lift. It's like you go up a gear, or it's
Yeah,
like you drop a gear to go fast and overtake. It's something physical.
yeah. But that can come from story, which is where the puffery might be. You know, the little ego boost that puffs up and aren't I good kind of thing. Now
What
that can give you
what I know.
yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say what I noticed when you said that. I'm right. I think what gives the kick, or what releases the drug, is I need to know. I need to know future. There's a comfort in that, and when I predict future and get it right, that my desire to know has been fed.
Yes.
There's something there about that.
Mm. Well, you can easily see how that is um, like a self assurance. That is a story that you tell yourself that tries to make it all right. Okay. I mean, you can see quite clearly, I imagine, that you can see quite clearly that you can't know what's going to happen in the future. It's not possible to know how things are going to work out. You know, there's all these circumstances, all these conditions that are just not on our radar, that turn up, that can anytime turn up and change what's going to happen. So no amount of planning is going to go for sure this will work out, because there's always that unforeseen thing. There's always that subtle twist that could happen that will change everything. So the idea
Yeah,
of knowing what's going to happen is just an idea.
yeah, and I think when you know that, as you get a bit wiser or older or whatever, it brings a humbleness to your approach to things. You're not going to be, when you're younger, you're right, and when you're older, you're more, well, maybe it could be this way, or you're a bit more humble about things. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but it's for me, it's about the courage to show up in each moment and be who you are and say what you say and do what you do, and maybe they're the reasons you're here and the skills you have, and you know,
Yeah.
uh, so there was something mixed up like with that in it. I want to be myself and be there, and not try to be wondering, well, what everyone else thinks of me and who should I be and how should I behave and what should I do. And in that moment, it was like the courage to be me, and I see what I see, and I know what I know, and I feel what I feel, and that brings together me and my role in my job and the skills I have, and to have that reflected back. Yeah, that works. That's good. That's do that, as opposed to, if everyone was telling me, Jesus, what's wrong with you? Or, you can't behave like that, or you shouldn't be, you're getting feedback from the world
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
there's something awry. So it's around authenticity and not being afraid to just be you.
Spontaneity. Yeah.
And in that authenticity and spontaneity, that what's meant for you won't pass you by, kind of thing. So whereas you're just trying to figure out where you fit and what you should do in the world, you never really get to your place because you're not stepping out there or whatever.
And just to take it a one step further, along with having no possible way of knowing what the future will bring, there is no possible way of knowing who you are or what you are. You're as much a mystery to you as anybody else is. You can't know what somebody else thinks or how they're going to behave or whatever. And you're that same mystery to yourself. You can't know you because your brain is not capable of knowing the intricacies of yourself. We kind of get the idea that we do, but it's such a rough, superficial knowing that it's not really worth anything. So you're quite
Yeah.
capable of surprising yourself as well.
I think that's a really good point, Vince, that you're discovering, or you like you can't know yourself. And so in a way, watching yourself behave or perform on the stage of life can be, uh, like when I thought I was right, can be uplifting and enjoyable and funny and nice, and then it can also be the opposite. Oh, making a show of yourself, doing the wrong thing or whatever. That unfolding creates the reaction.
Mm.
Um, but like you said, they're both the same reaction, but they're labeled differently by the ego, which uses the opportunity to continue itself. Oh, you're bad. Oh, you're good. I'll go along with whatever one of these works because I get to go along with it. So yeah,
Mm. Yeah, we're down at a more subtle level than we would be at the beginning, it's for sure, yeah. Um, and it is well, it's a huge thing what you said earlier, that if you take credit for good, then you take responsibility for bad, and neither of those are appropriate. But they do get locked in if you get sucked into that kind of response. So the idea is that joy is fine if things go right, and disappointment is fine if things go wrong. But it's got nothing to do with you. It's just a bodily response. I mean, I say bodily response like that. I'm not saying it categorically. I'm just saying it's a good way to look at it. And
yeah,
it's not part of the story, so to speak. But it is, of course, it is. But it's a benign story rather than a one that's going to get us into trouble.
yeah. And I have this then recurring belief, or it's an idea that's occurring in my head throughout the weekend that on Monday I'm going to bring this external person and haul them over the coals because of this and because of extra money that wasn't accounted for or brought up that we're now going to have to spend, and another issue where we paid them to do something and they didn't do it. We had to go and get someone else to do it, and get them to pay for some or all of this, and then to be able to go back and say, I resolved this, and here's what I got out of them, and it's all for
Mm.
value of getting value for money. And but it's this whole story I'm running, and like you said, I don't know what's going to happen Monday. There may not even be a phone call, so
You never know. That's right. You
it,
turn up and things are entirely different. Who knows? Yeah. But you do
yeah.
what
Or
you
you
need
or
to
you get
do, and you cope with. You just live with whatever the outcome is.
so right now it's just the story that is running.
Mm.
That could be a good story and puff you up, as opposed to one of the stories I run that brings me down.
Hmm.
Uh,
So the thing to do is recognize that the story's running, right? So it's not about the content of the story; it's about the fact
mhm.
that the story is there and going, right? So it's never about what it seems to be about. It's always about what caused that to come up, what's underneath it. And so the fact that there's a story about whether it'll go right or will it go wrong, it's not the issue of whether it'll go right or it'll go wrong. It's about the issue is that there's a story at all, and that's telling you something, that there's something underneath it, that story is attempting to achieve something. And what is it it's trying to achieve?
Yeah, there's the desire to be right and a desire to be seen, and there's a desire to be, and it feels quite young again, like a child, a young
Yeah, yeah,
person. I
yeah. And so recognizing that that's underneath this, that desire, you can go, well, what's that sit on top of? Now, we're not talking about
oh,
desire itself. Yeah.
oh, we're back to I'm no good.
We're going to come back to that every time, I guess, until we don't. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. So to want to not be that way, that's okay. That's just there too.
I just thought I was getting a break for a week from that. Thanks, Vince. Mm.
The
Yeah.
moment you feel okay about it, it'll be gone.
Well, I caught a quick story running there. Well, you see, now we're back at this, and until you deal with this, all those other things are going to keep building on top. And it feels like it's a story, but it feels a bit true too. You know, that the way you're like, well, there's something in that that's not true.
We're down at fairly subtle levels now.
Yeah, I'm in sensation. There's the odd thought like, oh, this is what happens when you build your house on sand. You've
Yeah.
built your house on sand.
And you just do what you need to do when you discover that. We don't regret it. We just do what is necessary.
Yeah, there's this subtle sadness, and even if I don't label that, I can sense it in the body.
Yep. And that's okay too.
Can I just jump in on that, Vince?
Yes, of
Dennis?
course.
Thanks. It's just funny what you said, Dennis. I was just talking to a guide, Alan, and I was saying that just stuff at work, like everyone, and I'm ruminating on those things, and but kind of noticing, but not usually until whatever scenario is played out in my head. And it was bizarre this morning. I went to the gym and I went for a shower afterwards, and then I finished my shower and I just realized I hadn't been there. I'd been putting the world to rights and talking to the owner of my school and exposing all the failings and doing whatever, and being really the hero of my own story, and everyone was sorry, and I was very magnanimous, I like to say, in my in my victory. And it's just,
Yeah.
and I just stood there and I just thought, where were you? It's just weird, this 5 minutes or whatever it was. And wherever I was, I wasn't in the shower. I was, and I don't know, I could have been stood there with a grin on my face. I'm not even sure that I had a shower. I think I do that automatically, but, who knows? Well, and yeah, all I can do at the moment, Dennis, is just when it's, at some point when it stopped, just kind of, and then get a bit frustrated. And, where was I?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also can go, about the frustration as well. That's good.
Yeah. Like, that was a bad thing. I was just away somewhere. Yeah.
It feels like sometimes when you do that, you've lived a lifetime in those few minutes. It's funny. I've done that. I know what you're talking about. But sometimes it's like, maybe we don't do, but it's like going to see a good movie. You just entertain yourself with a little play or a show away from this play or show. Yeah.
But what's great about it is I'm always right. That's that's what's lovely about my movie, and the world is as I think it should be.
Yeah.
Or whatever's.
But can you imagine those people who do that all the time, and in their story they're always wrong?
It's
That'd be
funny
worse,
you
wouldn't it?
said that. Yeah, and I think I don't know. Yeah.
I think as Vince says, it's the same thing. It's just how we're set up. What's the same as ego, right or wrong? Both the same.
Yeah. And I
But it
think,
is back. Go on,
sorry,
David.
go on, Dave. I was just going to say, like, I've had big periods of what I call depression in the past, and I think in those periods I do the gloom, like the disaster, the kind of, you know, this is wrong and that's wrong and this is how it's going to play out. But I can't kind of quite remember or put myself there at the moment. I just feel okay, and you know, so the scenarios are all different, but I don't know, Dennis.
Well, what I love about coming on here is that no matter where we're at, and I felt very up and out in the world, work, whatever it is, and we very quickly come back to, okay, so it's about the feeling here now. Because we can talk at a certain level forever. We can talk at a higher level for even longer. But when we quickly look, you're back down to come back here. What's going on now? Oh, I'm sad. And in the unrecognizing of that, or not looking at it, we do what you described. We daydream, we think, we fantasize, we think about how things are going to go. We plan, we worry, whatever we want to call it. It's all a waste of time in one way, but it's what we do because we're not able to sit with ourselves and just go, what's going on? So
we do it anyway. We all do it. But I mean, there is that what do you call them? You know, the hero story kind of thing and so on, where it's much more like a movie per se, but we also do it just everywhere we move through. If we get sensitive enough to notice the way our thoughts occur, you know, they're not most of our thoughts are probably, they're not verbal or textual. You know, they're little movies, they're little images that we have, and they're out of time. There's no. I mean, we can have a flash that seems like it lasted kind of 0.000 of a millisecond, but it in fact is a whole story, and it's the whole thing. And we do that all the time. We move through the day. I'm going to put my pants on. I imagine myself putting my pants on before I even pick them up. You know, or I'm going to my shoes, and I pick which pair of shoes am I going to put on, and there's a picture of my shoes. You know, and so if we get sensitive, really sensitive to what goes on, we'll see these kind of little movies going on all the time, and they're all kind of guiding us in what we're going to do. You know, sometimes they actually get turned into a physical reality, and sometimes they don't. They get lost, and it doesn't happen. But yeah, they're there at a subtle level, a really subtle level. But what you're talking about is, I guess, the ones that we might call escape movies, you know, where we want to change the way we feel, and we do that with them. Yeah. Or we want to resolve a story about a problem, and we want to resolve it, so we run scenarios to do that. You know,
Yeah, I think that's hit the nail. It is about changing the way I feel as well. It's like I'm not happy with this, so let's go off here and make it perfect. Yeah, you're right.
So a good one that had me going for a long time, years ago now, but it was like, you can imagine a cat it jumps through a window to get outside. You know, this window's open and the cat jumps through, and then you rerun it back to the cat's inside and it's walking along, and then it starts to move towards the window. Does it imagine itself jumping through the window before it actually does? I don't know if there's any answer to it, but I mean, you can imagine that the cat sees a picture of itself jumping through the window, and then it jumps through the window, or not. Who knows? And we know exactly that much about ourselves as well.
yeah, to me, it's right. The root of it right now is it's a kind of a switch between I'm okay or I'm not okay. And if I'm not okay, all this stuff that I described happens. But if I'm okay, I'm okay. Then the chips can land where they will, and life is free and free to and free from all that sort of good stuff. But it's all dependent on if I'm okay.
What if
And I think that
what if I'm okay or I'm not okay, both disappeared? What if it was ceased to become a thing at all?
mm,
I'd like to have that as a seed that gets planted and hopefully might sprout one day. See, what is what is. And any idea about it being okay or not okay is just an idea about it. A post-it note on reality, as Pernilla says.
yeah, you see, there's a subtle duality. There's what is, and what is what is. Then there's and I that's okay is preferable to I that's not okay. So we're back to what is, or that, and I.
So what comes to mind is this I that is okay or not okay. How is that any different to the breeze when you go outside? How is it any different to daylight?
Because the breeze, daylight is what is,
Exactly.
and I'm talking about I
Which is
in relation to it.
mm, in terms of what is, it's no different. It's as objective as that is.
I just feel this huge, big, energetic I in the center of my body, from the bottom of my belly to the top of my head. It's like a column in my being, in my body. That's I. You
Is
can
that a
suck it out
felt
with a vacuum.
is that a felt
Be great.
sense or an image, Dennis?
It's a felt sense that I put a label on to describe it.
So are you saying that if you feel it, it's got to be real and it's got to be an I?
It just feels like what I call I. It feels like if it wasn't here, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
So how do we get rid of it? It's the one that needs to be right and doesn't like being wrong. It feels energetic, contracted.
Let's not try to get rid of it. I mean, if you feel that, that's what you feel. Let's not even analyze it. But why do you call it I and not Fred? Or watermelon? Call it watermelon.
Yeah, maybe if I don't call it anything and just feel it.
Hmm. Because whatever you call it is has implicit in it a story, doesn't it? Whereas if you just feel it, it is just a feeling. Or even more particular, it's just a sensation.
It's based on the assumption that everything out there is perfectly okay. I know enough and I've listened to enough about out there is fine. Out there is what's out there and it's what it is. It is what it is. You're not going to change it. Out there is out there. So in here is then where the I is. And in here is where the work needs to get done. So I can't be thinking about work and this and that. It's all back to in here. Everything that's a problem out there is really in here.
Okay, so what comes to mind there is that maybe what could be of value for you is to look at the difference between out there and in here. Because I want to shout at you that how are they different? How is out there, and in here, in here? If you take a glass, an empty glass on the bench, how is what's in the glass different to what's outside the glass?
Yeah, to me, that's all just outside. I'm not interested in it right now. I want to
So to
get to the
change it,
root
we
of.
put a lid on the glass.
No,
Does inside become different to outside then?
no,
It's kind of easy to objectify that stuff, isn't it? But not so easy to objectify inside you, easier to objectify outside you.
well, what I'm calling inside me is sensation.
Dennis, one thing that occurs to me is you were identifying that particular area of sensation along your torso to your head that you were labeling as I. If you feel into a sensation in your foot that I interpreted of you as thinking not part of that I, like what is different between that sensation that's outside of that space and the sensation that you were putting in that container as I?
Yeah, I suppose when I look for myself that sensation became very obvious. And so I labeled it I, because it feels like it's where sensations that maybe are stuck or whatever create the sense of an I, create the problems, create the emotions, create the stories, create the outward issues. Whereas the sensation in my foot doesn't do all that. It's just the sensation. But when you look at the sensation in the column of the chest versus the sensation in the foot, they're both sensations. But the foot one feels a little bit freer and tinglier, and the one in the column feels a bit heavier, a bit denser.
Does it feel sticky?
Not sticky, heavy. That idea of carrying around a big wet backpack all your life and realize you don't need to carry it anymore popped up when I was feeling into the sensation, the weight of it.
Is that heaviness, does it have a quality of, you're getting really tricky here, that it's not just a sensation of weight, that heaviness, is it? It's also a sensation of mood. Would you say mood? How?
Yeah, well, the way I went to it when you were just speaking, it was like, it feels like it's two buckets full of tears that need to be cried.
Okay. Oh, that's revealing, isn't it? Yeah. So there definitely is that feeling of mood about it. There's that feeling of,
Mm.
um,
It's a frozen mood, Vince, maybe. I don't.
yeah, I mean, it's really hard to be clear about these things, isn't it? But yeah, we get just the feeling of it. Yeah. So what I get out of what you just said, that was really graphical. That those buckets of tears, is that that's really old stuff. Would you say? Would
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah,
And it has a feeling of stuck about it.
yes, it's frozen.
Yeah, I guess the frozen. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Would you go as far as to say stale? Or is it still very fresh, even though it's old? It's been there a long time. It's still fresh.
Still fresh, yeah, I wouldn't say stale. That doesn't resonate, but
So you would have to say then for that freshness that it's been kept alive. It's been kept active. It's not stagnant. It's just been there a long time, but it has an energy about it that's
yeah, I suppose that freshness is the word. It makes it feel like that's why I call it the eye.
has it got some this is weird stuff. I don't know where it comes from. Has it got some AYE type I in it as well as the letter I? Has it got some yes about it? That I?
Sorry, I didn't AYE.
I was just playing with it. How, AYE is another way of saying I, isn't it? Aye, sir. Aye. Yeah. But I mean that the yesness is like an affirmation. I was serious in my question, even though it was a bit crazy, that has some affirmation about it.
I feel like it's made up of resistance and maybe anger and
Okay, so it's pretty dark.
feels like I'm trying to soften into it and feel into it and see what's lying around. Sort of thawing it out a little bit to get a look at what's here.
Mm.
Dennis, when I touched into that sadness that's here as you spoke, it almost felt like it might be so much that it would be never ending. And yet I heard you also say that it was 2 bucketfuls. And I was just wondering about sinking into that sense of sadness.
Yeah, and I've thought
Feeling,
that before, and it can be two tears. That's the
yeah.
trick.
Mm,
It's funny because I can't, you can't make, well, I can't make myself cry, but sometimes
mm,
something shifts and it's just an energy that moves and you can feel it and you get the lump in your throat and then you feel
yeah,
heat in the face and you cry and it's a very experiential and it feels great. Like crying is an amazing experience. I can't make myself do it, but when I
right.
do it, that pillar of eye just is what flushes out resolve.
But then it fills up again.
Yeah, that's kind of the way things go, isn't it? It kind of slowly comes back. Maybe that's just biological things that I'm calling I.
So is there any point in getting it out if it's going to replenish itself? If it sits on some wellspring of infinite source of what it is?
For the purpose of speaking, I think the practice to feel it, feel the sensations, feel it without labeling it, and then to put some words around it, it thaws, it frees up a little, and it can be expelled or coughed out in normal day-to-day life. You've sort of thawed out your leg now, so you can start to walk around and run on it. as an example.
Hmm. What if we don't need to get rid of it? What if, what if, what if it's an integral part of you that's required?
Yeah. Then it feels like it just needs to spread out into the rest of the body.
Right. Not be so concentrated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the concentratedness of it, contracts in around a certain part of the body. And I think anytime we've looked at these energies or sensations or tingles, it then just starts to move outward into the body, rest of the body. Just, I was just remembering when I was a kid, I used to try and move coins with my mind, with my finger. And that was based on the idea that maybe the energy moves outward outside the body.
What if you gave up just before you discovered how to do it? Or didn't discover how to do it, but actually did it?
Did what, Vince?
Moved that coin with your mind. Did you stop believing in magic at some point, or believing in whatever you were looking for?
No, no, no. That sense of there's magic everywhere is still very much alive.
Right. Yeah. It's really valuable, that one. So instead of getting rid of this column, what if you just discovered that what it really is your spinal column, and the energy that you're experiencing is very real, and you were just calling it something else?
You might explain why I feel so tight in those areas then, because the analogy or the way you described there, yeah, it's like for years I've been trying to pull the spine out of my back. I can't feel good to the body.
Wow. It's amazing what comes up. You took me back years and years and years. I don't know, must have been in my 20s or sometime. No, maybe even earlier than that. And I was working on a farm, and we had this cow, and we were sure that it had a lemon stuck in its throat, and I had my hand down its throat, I had this lemon in my hand and I'm trying to pull this lemon out. and it turned out it was part of the cow that I was trying to pull. It was not a lemon at all, but it was and I was convinced that the thing was choking and I was going to save it. Yeah, that,
Yeah,
where
that's
that
it.
memory came from, that must be 50 years old, that memory. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to fix something that's not broken, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a good way to keep a self going, isn't it?
Well, see, I know that this is not a self. I know that this is just a label you've got on something, and I don't know that it's something that we need to get rid of. But I would certainly look at the way you're describing it, or the way you're labeling it, as presuming that we know something that we actually don't.
I suppose I'm remembering when it felt like it wasn't there, when there was a more light, airy emptiness to the body, or after a good cry, there's a release and a relief and a softness, or when on retreat for a week, there's a lightness and airiness to the body, and it's the opposite of that. It's a contracted type,
Mm,
you know, holding, and it's holding so long now. There's back pain and there's
sure.
nerve, just it's that contraction, or no. I think people talk about it in the lower gut and all this. I don't have any of that lower gut, whatever. It's
Mm. But again,
the
we
back,
jump to
it's upper back.
conclusions about getting rid of it when in fact transforming it may be an alternative. And maybe we don't even need to transform what it is, but rather the way we see it.
What I noticed is I noticed it changes. There's some relief, and then I go about my day, my life, and then I come back, and it's like you just keep letting a little bit of air out each time. You keep giving it a bit of release. Is there a root to it? Is there a cause? Is there a not maybe the eye?
Besides that feeling that you're calling you or I, is there any space?
But when I look at what I'm calling I, without calling it I, it's just sensation, and it does tend to spread out.
So even when it's there and you're calling it I, is there still space as well?
Yeah, when you call it I, does it contract into something different? Does it change it?
Yeah, that's when it feels like it comes into the head and the column of the spine, and the tightness, the contraction. The eye is solidifying effect.
That's interesting, isn't it? The way you think about it causes the sensation to feel different.
Can the space and the sense of I be there at the same time? The feeling of I and space together.
Not really, not together. Like it's a focusing. If you focus on the eye, the space is not in focus. And then if you just relax and not call it an eye and sense the sensations, it's spread out into space. It's like it's like in Lord of the Rings, the eye or Sauron.
So how do you know that the space is not the I as well? Because sometimes that's there. Why don't you call that me?
It's very neutral. It's dead. It's just not interesting. The interest is around the body sensations. If there's no body, there'd be nobody calling anything eye. So the idea of space is just a concept. I'm in the field of sensations. There's just sensations of what we call the body.
But earlier you were saying that that space feels quite nice, quite expansive. I can't remember the words you used, but it sounded quite good.
Yeah, the energy or the contraction or the dominant energy dissolves or moves out more into the space.
So would you say when that happens, there's less of an I for me? Does that label of me drop off more in that expansiveness?
I would say there's more presence and less contracted me as an ego.
So does the sense of me and that column in your body keep you away? Does trying to get rid of that feeling, that column in your body, keep you away from the expansive?
Yes. The answer was yes the minute you started the question.
At the same time, it seems like it helps you bring you to that sense of presence and expand. It's like a door to the presence and expansion. You can use it to get there just by paying attention to it.
Mhm.
What if you change the story to thank you, column of tension, for helping me be present?
Yeah, so like I'm doing it now and everything is softening.
So what if the senses in the body, the column, and the expansiveness are you?
Well, the sense of me, the ego sense of me, is dissolving with the expansion of the sensations into space. So what's then more noticed is presence, peace, what's looking.
So would you say then when that seeking energy of wanting to get rid of that sense of I, when that happens, it's ignoring the expansiveness of you that's there also, because it wants to get rid of the I.
I'm confused when you say you and I.
So when you've got that tunnel vision on that column, that sense of me,
Yeah, ego me, ego self.
which is a label, it's a sensation,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? We don't know what it is, it's just a sensation of a column that we put a label on. But there's also the expansiveness that could also be you. That you focus in tunnel vision on the column, that sense of me. And as Jeremy said, there's a portal into something else if you put your attention there as well. So the focus that is channeling in on, oh, this me's still here, and when that goes, then there'll be no me. But the expansiveness is me too. They can both be there.
Okay, so we're dealing with two me's now. Okay.
What if we just throw the label away of anything that defines what you are? What if there's just sensation and expansiveness to various degrees? So they're both allowed to be here. The mind wants to label it me, or I, or Dennis, or Anne. So what? So what the mind labels things?
Another thing that at least I found helpful at times is your, like in your case, your mind is labeling that as me. What if you look for evidence of that being true? Look for the, can you find anything that resembles that in those sensations?
No. This is that nut I haven't been able to crack, where I can't find an I or a me, but still believe there is one.
Do you believe there is one because there are still sensations there?
I don't know why I believe there still is. I don't know why I still believe there is one. I'd have to go into a story and then look into the body to come up with another story for you to tell you why. Because there's a pain in my left elbow, you know, that kind of thing.
How do you know that that belief is there? If you feel the sensation and you can't find the me, what are you experiencing that tells you that there's also something else that is evidence of the belief?
Well, there's no evidence of the belief, and the belief isn't here. So how do we work that one out?
Hang on, you're saying there's no belief there, yet you do believe that there is an I.
Well, when I looked for the belief in the moment, there was no belief.
Right.
But the mouth will speak the words. I believe there's an I every now and then. Like it's just done now.
Mm.
I'm sorry, can I ask something? Because
Yes.
I don't understand. When you say you can't find self, you can't find me, what is it exactly what you can't find?
Great question.
Yeah, because I feel quite present, and if I can do a number of things at this point. I can go into my head and come up with a story that I can feed you to keep the conversation going, or I can just be present.
So if you report your experience, what can you find? What is it you do find in experience? Don't go into the story thing.
Yeah, that's an easier question than what Bianca asked, because I can report what I find versus reporting the I can't find. So I want to come back to Bianca's question, but just to answer yours, I can report sight, seeing, I can report hearing, I can report sensations, I can report silence.
Yep. And if you stay away from story, you can't call any of them I or me, right? The only way you can call them I or me is to go into story.
Well, let's take one, feeling, sensations. So the conditioning that I am feeling, it's the issue between I am feeling sensation versus there's just sensations.
So do you recognize the I am feeling sensations, that the I am feeling part is
Thoughts.
just mental?
Yeah, in the direct experience, there's just sensations.
Hmm.
And I have to add thought that I am feeling. So I is a very ingrained, habitual set of beliefs.
Hmm. So what
Nearly
what
run
if,
under the radar.
yeah, I get it. Yeah. So what if I said to you that that belief has as much credibility as the belief Donald Trump has that his IQ is higher than Einstein's?
Yeah, so it's not true, but I still go back to the magician to see the woman sawn in half and believe she's been sawn.
But at the magician show, you recognize that your senses are telling you something that is blatantly not true because there's no blood, there's no
Yeah,
scream.
so why do I go back to the thought? Or why does the thought have agency in this space? What gives a thought or a belief its stickiness to here versus Donald Trump is a pink elephant, which has no stickiness?
Hmm. So the last thing we want to do is deny that. We don't want to force change on that. We want to recognize the fallacy of it. And recognition is about discovery. So it's that stickiness that is where that recognition needs to be focused, where, or at least where the focus needs to be for the recognition to happen. It's on the stickiness of that, not on that itself, just on the stickiness. Another way to look at that stickiness might be to say, what is the advantage of the presence of the stickiness? What's it do for
But
you? What do you get out of it?
what I wanted to ask was, what's the problem in believing in an I?
the same problem, which is no problem, I guess, as believing that unicorns exist or that pink elephants run around the place. It's not that there's a problem, but there are consequences to that.
Yeah, this all feels very one-pointed, and I'm trying to see something. Like, I is just a word. It doesn't have any inherent anything in itself. So what's operating here that changes the experience because of the belief in I? The word I could be flamingo. So believing in a word isn't an issue in itself. It's the mechanism of
Yeah, that's
believing or
So what if, as an exercise, as an attempt to clarify what's actually happening, is that you spend the next, till we next see you, not calling it an eye, but calling it a flamingo, and just see what happens. If every time you say, so even you could even imagine, play it out in your mind, even imagine when you say, I want chocolate ice cream, say flamingo wants chocolate ice cream, just as a way of changing the quality of the word I, whatever that brings to it that we're not quite seeing at the moment. Just substitute
yeah,
flamingo and
it's like it'll allow me to distill even clearer what's going on.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll.
You didn't give me a straightforward answer, but what I've heard is agency. The thing that I'm doing, the feeling, I'm doing, the sensing. It's just this agency, the sense of agency.
Yeah,
Mm. That's
I is just a symbol for it.
Mm. Which takes you into a feeling of control, a feeling of responsibility, feeling of choice, feeling of a whole lot of things that rest on that same sense of agency.
So is my issue a belief in agency? Is there no agency in truth?
You haven't thought.
Dennis, are you the one who's believing in in an I?
Say that again, Ray.
Am I the one believing in an I? No, I think I believes in an I. It's like a set of thoughts or thoughts that run in the mind and create a chemical bodily reaction. do when they run that sets up the feeling of I.
Is
But
that
it
your
feels like that.
experience?
Is what my experience?
What you're talking about?
Well, no, I answered the question with my mind by thinking.
Did you?
So this is a great point. What Ramiz is, what I heard Ramiz ask is that this column that you're calling an I, is that what believes in an I, or is it something separate from that that believes that that is the I? And if you've got two eyes, is there that I that is separate that believes that that is the I?
I can't find what believes in the I. Does that answer your question, Ramiz?
I'm not looking for an answer.
I kind of figured that too, yeah. When you said it, what came up for me was, do thoughts think?
Yeah. Do thoughts believe?
No. So what believes what believes there's an I?
The only credible answer to that is I. But that doesn't really make sense. I believes there's an I. Well, maybe it does.
Yeah, but is it just a thought? I
Mm.
think we've passed like thoughts. Just
So
belief in thoughts.
if we just said there is a belief, not that I believes, but that there is a belief. Let's not look at what believes or what is believed. There is just a belief that I exists.
Yeah.
A belief is only a thought.
Well, that's a good question. Can a belief exist separate from a thought? So we look at what a belief is. There's a belief can't be expressed without a thought, but is a belief inherent in the thought? If it is, it's a special kind of thought, isn't it? There are a lot of thoughts like we don't believe the thought about pink elephants.
Yeah. So what is that? There's a thought, and we call it belief. So belief is like thought and sensation.
Well, the sensation and the thought don't have to be the same thing. The sensation certainly gives validity to the thought, doesn't it? Or the other way around. But I don't know. But yeah, there's a connection between them.
It appears to corroborate the thought.
Hmm.
But in actuality, when you look, sensation just corroborates sensation.
Yes.
Thoughts are just dead thoughts. Like thoughts don't think. So when they look separately, they don't corroborate. But when they start to come together, they appear to corroborate.
Hmm.
But something is giving juice to this. That's not the thought or the belief or even the sensation. Something is.
Yeah, that's a critical
Hiding in the background,
Yeah.
making all this happen.
Yep. So belief is probably a label that is another escape from the situation. So that could be a way. Let's dismiss belief. Let's just say there is something that we don't know what it is that provides some stickiness to what is seen as an I. And yet, even when we look close, we don't see it as an I. We see it as just sensation. But there is that stickiness. It's really hard to see there, isn't it? It's really, really tricky.
Does stickiness
think-
come from conditioning? I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, okay.
I was just wondering, does stickiness, does that come from conditioning, which to me is just something that happens to the body, is nervous system
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah, is it like a habitual thing that triggers chemistry and sensation and the stuff in the body?
What I find sometimes a bit confusing is that when we talk about thoughts, the first thing that comes to mind is like verbal thoughts or maybe mental images or something like that. But I think there's also a layer of more subtle thoughts that maybe, I don't know if there is something like pre-verbal thoughts or something,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
yeah, maybe just like, for example, sometimes sometimes I wake up from a dream and then the dream doesn't really have a content in the sense of a story, but it's like an atmosphere or something like that, or a feeling, I don't know, that I dreamt, but I could not really name it. But
Mm.
it's still like kind of a thought. It's a thought of an atmosphere, a thought of
Yeah, I would say an impression.
an impression. Yeah, maybe it's a good word. But then at that point, maybe it could be easily confused with a sensation. I don't know. So I could imagine that sometimes like this mm, sense of an I or I thought, maybe that's like not always something very verbal, or maybe it's something more subtle. So that's why we could be tempted to think it's not a thought.
Yes, you could be right. I go along with that. Definitely we have thoughts that could be sensory thoughts. So as you say, that we get beyond words to be able to describe. But yeah, the impressions is a good word. I really like that. And that we could call that a thought.
But that also shows that it's just a label we put to our, I don't know, what we our experiencing. So there is actually not maybe a clear border between like sensation and thought.
Yeah. It is jumping the gun a bit, but I have a clear impression that sensations are also thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, it could be something like only the label like presence or something. There is something.
Mm.
I want to better understand what you meant by that, Vince. What the thought that came up was, if I take a bite out of a lemon, there the experience of that is different than thinking about taking a bite out of a lemon.
Mm. Mm.
And so it's like there's more something
Mm.
when
Mm.
you're actually taking out the bite.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm not suggesting at all that in that way it is limited to what that is. That's an additional experience. Yeah. It's kind of beyond me to make sense of that. It's something I heard that rings true for me, is probably as close as I can get to it. That and I can easily see how the direct experience of biting a lemon, which is a theoretical thing, but that includes uh, that includes thought stuff. That it can't be separated from that in it really completely. It's
Well, when you dream about biting a lemon, is it a thought or a sensation?
yeah, and you will have the experience as well. That is, and yet it is constructed of thought stuff, but the body reacts to it. So they can't be separated.
Here's a weird thought. To me, the experience of eating a lemon versus the imagining, they're quite close. They're very similar. There's not a lot of difference. You might think there is, but
Hmm.
there's still a visual image. There's still sensation.
Well, Pavlov's dog is a perfect example. You ring the bell and they start salivating. Is it just a thought?
This is really interesting. I mean, you've just hit the nail on something there for me, Vince, because I thought there's not a sort of thought or a sense or a strong sensation or feeling, but there's like a sensory thought. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Just to
yeah.
clarify.
I didn't say
And
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always baffled me that, especially when, you know, I suppose it's noticeable when you've had a dream, a strong dream. I always get a bit baffled when I get them because, you know, we know a thought's a thought and we know a sensation's a sensation, but then there's this middle ground that is a bit blurry, and you kind of get quite a lot of that, I think, in between it, sensation, feeling. But the question comes up in my mind automatically, so what do I do about that?
Enjoy it. Yeah. Yeah, it's our nature to separate things. You know, we want to separate everything. You know, we want to separate the you write with a pen and we call it ink on paper. You know, but they can't be separated, can they? You know, that's there. It's an artificial thing to separate them, but that's what we do all the time. We separate things.
But
So I
there's
think
something that wants to know it and understand it because it's kind of unknown. So
Yeah, but
there's that
knowing and
part.
understanding requires us to separate things and try and analyze them,
Yes. Yeah.
which ignores a reality, and that is that nothing's
Yeah.
separate. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I've heard that as well, that I can't remember how you put it. That's, let's say, sensations or biting a lemon is also a thought. That's what you were saying, yeah? Just clarify. Suggested that you'd heard that.
Yeah.
And it rang true, and it rings true for me as well. And also to look at the bigger picture, it's kind of like it takes me to, well, obviously that's why the whole thing would be a dream, because we think that biting a lemon is really real, and the imagination of biting a lemon is not real. We've categorized them. But actually, nothing is real.
Yeah, or everything is. Yeah, same thing, though. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
This is reminding me a little bit of a question that you posed a while ago, Dennis, about like I think you said what is the problem of believing in an I?
Yeah.
It makes me think of, to kind of borrow your phrase, Vince, is that it's not necessarily a problem, but the consequence of believing in an I. I would say that like the believing in the I is not necessarily, it's not limited to believing in an I. It's taking thoughts. And I guess I'm also posing this as a question related to what we're just talking about right now between sensations and thoughts. Is taking thoughts to be more than what they are. And the story that's made up of the thoughts to be more than what it is, as opposed to what you are directly seeing, hearing, feeling right now. Like if there's a story about you being no good, believing that over your visual experience, your bodily sensations, has consequences that can lead to
It's
suffering.
funny. You can talk about this on so many levels. Like ultimately, like we're in a certain space here talking about this. It's like biologically things fire together. Like to go back to the consequences of being an I. Like if I start going around to everybody saying I'm a woman, there's consequences in the world to doing that, but the consequences of saying I'm an I, everyone, bar a few, believe they're an I too. So there shouldn't be consequences to being an I in that way, in that you're different. So it's not a consequence in relation to
there is a bit
others.
of a paradox there, but yeah, look, yeah, the consequences of believing in an I is suffering.
Yeah, it's not an outward consequence like saying I'm a woman,
That's right.
which
Yeah,
there would be outward consequences. It's an inward consequence. But it's somehow connected to the whole lemon thing, because it really struck me there, like the idea that, and you were right, it's just an idea, it's not even real, but the thinking about eating a lemon versus eating a lemon are very similar. It's the same reason why some bodybuilders can think about lifting weights and their muscles will grow.
yeah.
Stuff is firing together. So visual, sensory, biological, everything is firing together. So it's like this is the imprint or what was laid down very young. And that's why, like, I was thinking, well, okay, if people are suffering from panic attacks, stuff is firing that they're not aware is firing, and something is triggering it. And the other thing that runs with it is being triggered, but they're not seeing that. And the only way is to really go into the sensations and the feelings as a way of sort of being free of it, or to not suffer it. So maybe my to sum up where I started, the sense of an I must be fully felt and seen and looked at if there's any chance of being free of it, or whatever may come from that.
And the crazy, crazy, crazy thing is, it's really, really valuable to see that, to recognize that that I is not actual. But the moment you see that, you can forget about it. You don't even need to come back to it again. You know, it's not an issue anymore.
Just going back a bit, is that actually true that bodybuilders can imagine their muscles building and they get
Absolutely.
bigger?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
There was an experiment done. There was an experiment done quite a few years ago, and it came to light when I was at university doing psychology, first year psychology, and it was a basketball team in America, and they divided the basketball team in half, and one half of them practiced for 10 minutes a day throwing hoops, right, from a long way away. And the other half sat on the sidelines and imagined themselves doing that. And at the end of 30 days of doing that, they had a test. And the ones who actually practiced it had increased their accuracy and their ability to do it by a really insignificant amount of 3% improvement or something like that. But the ones who sat on the sideline and imagined themselves doing it actually improved their performance by something like 60%. It was just a huge difference. And it's really easy to see that the ones who sat on the sideline, they never missed. They imagined it and they never missed that basket once. But the ones who are actually doing it, yeah, they missed.
So that leads me to think, or to wonder, so what are we doing here then? Can't we just sit around imagining that we're happy and content and we don't want to wake up, that there's no I?
It all
What
comes
about
back to
that?
that sticky thing called belief. Yeah, that could work. Yeah. Go to a non-dual meeting. That's what that's about.
What do you mean? I thought this was a non-dual meeting.
Oh, no. Oh, don't say that.
What is this then?
There's no label for this. I don't
So
know.
you don't class the fetters as non-dual then?
Oh, look, well, this is not about fetters either. This is about
Life.
this, whatever this is. Yeah.
Mm. So that's really interesting. I didn't know you felt like or thought like that. So, oh God,
It's
sorry,
not
I had
about
to take.
changing beliefs. Beliefs will change, but it's not a. That's not the point of doing this. Is not about. It's not the intention. Is not to introduce better beliefs. That will happen, but that's not the purpose of this. The purpose is to see, well, to debunk.
No, but
Yeah.
let's say the main purpose for anyone and the purpose for getting into this or non-duality or the fetters is to eliminate suffering. So it's just making, I mean, if you can grow a muscle by just thinking about it, or imagining it rather, where does that play into this? Because that's quite a big statement. That really is a big thing, that. I mean, it's just like, to be honest, it makes me want to just go off and start imagining and creating. It does. It's like, oh, what can I imagine that I'd like?
Yeah,
if it's that
start with the
powerful.
book, The Secrets, if you want to go down that road.
I touched into all that. I wasn't that interested, but if there's some factual reality to it, if you can throw hoops or whatever it was, or you can grow a muscle, I mean,
Well,
We're not interested in that.
at a
I'm not
practical
interested in
point,
growing muscles by thinking about it.
yeah, at a practical
no, but
level, it
you're
might or might
interested
not work. It
in
depends on your underlying attitude, I guess.
Well, let's take Dennis, who is convinced he's got this eye, and so
Am I the only one on here who's convinced of an eye? Just for
I'm not convinced at all. No.
I find myself in situations where thought habits occur and feels like there's an eye, and then when I notice those are happening and I look for it, I don't find it. That's like there's this automatic autopilot happening, and when I see the autopilot, I don't find it. But I can't claim that I walk around and there's never that thought or sensation of feeling like there's an eye there. So I guess some of what you're saying, Dennis, is resonating.
Can I just go back to the imagining, because I know what I'm like, and that'll be my new tool of like, oh, this sounds interesting. So I just can't, it wouldn't that, because I just think everybody involved in this is interested in diminishing or lessening or relieving or totally abolishing suffering in any sense. And so if you can make physical things manifest, then why not use imagination to do that?
Then you can also do the opposite as well. So, all right, here's a good example. You've heard me tell you about the polyps that they discovered after my bowel cancer operation, and getting rid of those polyps. That worked. There was no question of that. I had a colonoscopy, and then they told me all the polyps were gone. Right?
Because you'd imagine them going.
Well, yeah, I did. I used yoga nidra and self-hypnosis, and I imagined little men in there doing their job, high pressure water spraying my colon and so on, and I got rid of all my polyps. But for the last 10 years, I've been trying to get rid of a gut, like 6 or 8 kilos too much weight. And I failed. Couldn't do it. Why?
Right.
What's the difference? I didn't book myself into a yoga ashram and put that much effort into it. I wasn't as obsessed about it. I don't know. What's the difference? So what you can do and what you do aren't necessarily the same thing. What's
Oh,
possible?
so are you pointing to that we don't have the agency to make that choice? It'll either happen or it doesn't.
Well, that's right. If you find yourself obsessed with doing that, then go off and do it, and you'll probably find it successful. Or not. I don't know.
So what you're saying then is try it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't end up worse off unless you beat yourself up over a failure, if that's what happens. But essentially, you won't be worse off.
So when you imagine your polyps going, and obviously I've got a lot of physical ailments. Well, not a lot. I've got physical ailments, and did you then picture them kind of not there and going to the man and saying they're not there?
What I did was I got into a meditative state, and whether you call that yoga nidra or self-hypnosis, I got into that meditative state, and I imagined a team of miniature blokes in high-vis vests running around with high-pressure water sprayers, cleaning off the side of my colon. And I did that for a couple of hours every day for basically for 10 weeks. And when I was also imagining not that they were just cleaning the stuff off the walls of my colon, but that the high pressure water sprayers were causing an increase in blood flow.
Wow.
Right. So and that was a very healing kind of thing. Right. And in 10 weeks, I went from being riddled with polyps to having no polyps. Right.
Wow.
We're going back. That happened in 1997. That's when we're going back. Right. Yet seems like such a simple thing to shed 6 or 7 kilos of weight, and I couldn't do it. I still can't do it. I've still got a gut that's way too big for me. I don't want it. And there you go.
But
So maybe I'm just not obsessed. See, the colon thing was if I went back and they found that I was still riddled with polyps, they were going to remove the rest of my colon. I would have a stoma bag and no colon at all. So the
you're not bothered
consequences
about
were pretty big, wasn't it? You know?
Yeah. Well, my consequences are big because every time I get an IBS attack, I feel the pain has been likened to the pain of childbirth when it's severe, and you can pass out or have to go to hospital. So there is a good intention.
So I would say that's a great idea. You spend an hour or two every day imagining those little men with high vis vests running out inside you doing repair work.
And funnily enough, when I'm feeling into it before I have to take, when it starts and it's not at the level of painkillers, and I don't do this, but there's an imaginary like benign energy, or I don't really like the word angels, but something, or even myself, kind of holding me in certain places that's quite like Reiki or healing, you know, and I've always thought that's strange because it's imagination, but
it's good stuff, I reckon. Really good stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's perked Kelly's ears up. Look, she's
You know,
she's like,
when I was stopping smoking, there was a massive belief that I could not stop smoking. So then I used the hypnosis, and it changed it to I can't stop smoking, but the hypnosis can work. And then just like that, I stopped smoking. And it was like a thing in my head that every time, there was an odd time I fancied a cig, but it's like, but you don't smoke. And that was really strong in my head, and I've never looked back. I think it can be tweaked.
And I'm
But
a bit
then,
like sugar. I did it with eating. That
yeah.
So there's
I
skill
just
in that
changed
too, though.
the belief. Pardon?
There's skill involved in how you approach that, you know. Like one of the things when I was doing hypnotherapy professionally, I got a lot of people came to me to stop smoking. Well, I never ever used the technique to make smokes taste terrible and make them feel sick or anything like that. I did not use aversion therapy. Yeah, that just I couldn't bring myself to do it that way. I always looked for the reason why they were smoking and worked at that level. But I had good success with people giving up smoking for that reason. Yeah. So again, it is about changing the belief about what's possible. That is a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because with the sugar, I knew that I had a big belief that I was addicted to sugar. And I'd cracked it before with alcohol in a different way because I had to learn through AA. But I knew that if there's a belief that I'm addicted to sugar, there's also a belief, or not even a belief, but there's the opposite of like, well, I also don't like sugar, or I don't need sugar, or it doesn't exist. Things like that. There's a place that you can be, which I'd never considered, where it's absolutely not a problem, and I've never considered that before. I didn't use imagination, but kind of
One
knew.
thing, and I'm your question about like why can't we just use thoughts to change things that we want to be different? I feel like in my experience, if like not suffering is what I prefer, thinking is a powerful tool that is a double-edged sword. I can think my way and feel like I got control to change the environment and I want something to be different and I use my thoughts to help me change that. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes it seems to work and sometimes it seems to not. And it seems like how do I put this? Feeling into my experience is a more reliable way of not suffering.
Yeah.
Not thinking is more reliable. Like if I think that I'm suffering and then I actually look in the moment, what do I see? What do I feel? Hear? Go into the direct sense of being alive in the moment. It's much harder to find suffering or to experience suffering. Or maybe another way to put it is that I only seem to experience suffering if thinking is involved. It's not that thinking always leads to suffering, is that it's if there's suffering, thinking also seems to be present.
And so we've got this thing where we don't know where our thoughts come. We can't control what we think about. They just turn up and they're gone, and that's it. So if you go, I'm going to change this situation with my thoughts, you've got to be really super careful that there isn't a thought underneath that says, oh, this is bullshit, the opposite will happen, or something, like it's just, we just, our thoughts are so subtle and yet so powerful and so strong at the same time, that when we start playing with thoughts, it's like playing with fire in a way. And so in the beginning, when we start this road, this so-called spiritual journey to awakening, right, it's appropriate to say, well, all our thoughts are bullshit. Let's not believe any of them. But after we've seen through that, that's no longer the case. After we've seen through that, it becomes, oh, okay, that's interesting. Look at that thought. Look at the effect that thought's having. Right? And then we start to realize that we, in fact, create the world with our thoughts. So thoughts become our friend again, and they become really big and really powerful stuff. But in the beginning, they were all total bullshit. So it's really, it's just, yeah, you're playing with fire when you start playing with thoughts like that.
Yeah, but Vince, you said we create the world with our thoughts. But I thought a slightly different sentence would be, thoughts create our world because there's no agency.
Yeah. Well, that's true. So,
and the other thing I wanted to mention, because it jumped on away from imagination, is what it made me realize is my thinking is majority auditory thinking. It's a voice. In my imagination, which my question is also, is imagination thinking, what I wanted to ask? My imagination is always visual. It's never auditory. So is imagination thinking? Because I believe that if I sat around thinking about something, I don't think you'd create a muscle by thinking about it, but how powerful is the imagination? Is it thinking?
So let me ask you this. Is there a difference between thinking and imagination?
That's kind of what I'm asking you.
Well, that's my answer, though. Is there a difference?
How do I look at that? I don't know what to say to that. To me, there is, yeah.
Okay.
Because the difference is, one is visual and it feels lighter and more fun, the imagination.
But
the other is
we
auditory.
recognize that we can have visual thoughts and auditory thoughts and sensory thoughts. And we can have thoughts that we can't even put into any category that are just impressions. We can have thoughts of a story. I've had a thought, this one hasn't occurred to me for a while, but I used to have a single thought that was like a book and that's an analogy in that that one thought was like the title of the book and it contained a whole story. And I didn't need to go in and read each page of that book story because I knew what it was about. But it was all contained in that one line, which was the heading of the book. And that was a single thought. And and if I was to tease it out individually, there would probably be 2 hours of of text to do that. So I mean that's a weird way to look at it, but that was a thought. And is it a thought or is it imagination? I really, quite frankly, I can't see the difference between imagination and a thought. A thought is just, we often, when we say thoughts, we refer to the verbal ones, don't we, or textual ones. But in fact, because there are these other thoughts that are, we can have auditory thoughts, So did I actually hear that, or did I just think that I heard it? occasionally I can't tell the difference. I don't know whether I thought I heard it or whether I actually did hear it.
Well, I'm thinking about, 'cause my career was in fashion, and so I had to use that creative side of my brain a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
you imagined, right? So you had pictorial thoughts or visual thoughts when you were imagining a fashion item.
yeah, and sometimes, and it still happens now because it's quite practiced in that way, I'll just get a pop-up image of something I want to wear, then forget about it, and then in the exact color and everything, and then go into a shop and it's there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like,
Well,
oh, like
yeah,
I've created it
that's interesting.
to
Isn't it?
imagine.
What about this one? Imagine, like I remember somebody frequently. I'm a bugger with names. I forget names, and yet I can have a picture of somebody, but it's not actually a picture. I know them. I could recognize them in a lineup. I could recognize them in the street, and yet when I try and describe that picture to myself, I have no way of doing it. Yet
Oh yeah,
I know exactly what they look like,
yeah.
but I can't see it. I just know I know it. It's weird. It's really weird stuff. Now, is that thinking or is that imagination? I really can't tell the difference. I think they're the same thing. They're just
I feel like
versions of.
there is like two type of knowing. Like the mind can only know a thought, like can reference another thought. And when I say that I know something, all I'm saying is that I think I know something. We can only know what we think we know. But the knowing you're talking about, recognizing someone, doesn't require thought. It just happens.
Yes, it is just a happening. Yeah.
And imagination feels like that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is there a difference between thought and just seeing it now and thinking?
But both of those things are not just black and white. They both, as Ramesh was saying, there are thoughts that are more obviously like at one end of the spectrum kind of thing, and then there is the other end where they're a lot less defined, but they still happen in that way. So we talk about these things like they're simplistic, but they're not. They're quite complicated.
Mm.
I wanted to ask something to everybody. It's maybe an extreme example, but yeah, at the moment I'm a bit ill. Not really, but I feel a bit exhausted. So yesterday I didn't really do a lot. I just stayed in bed, and then I somehow started to watch documentaries about countries I don't know. And it was about several Central African countries. And of course, it's not something surprising for me, but it was like about all those military conflicts and hunger and people living in permanent fear because there are like criminals killing people in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And of course, yeah, it's not reality. It's something that I see on the internet, but I don't have any doubt in the reality of millions of people on this planet who live like in conditions that we can't even imagine, I guess. And it sounds like super trivial, but somehow I really got aware of the privilege that we have to talk about all these things and about suffering and things like that. I was just wondering, like, okay, in our cases, it's maybe, for example, traumatic things that happened to us in our childhood, for example, and maybe that there is a toxic starting point coming from that, and that has like an impact on how we experience things. But I was really wondering, I mean, yeah, of course, I can still imagine that suffering has to do mostly with thinking. But if like to an adult person, like this kind of super traumatic things happen all the time, then I was just wondering if we're still talking about the same subject. I mean, I was just wondering, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good one. Here's a quick story. Some years ago now, somebody, I don't remember who, did a study around the world of happiness. And it was quite a long study, apparently, and it was all around the world. Anyway, they ended up that they found that the happiest person in the world was a German Buddhist monk. I've forgotten his name now, but yeah, he was considered to be the happiest person in the world, for obvious reasons, I guess. But really interestingly, the second happiest was a family in India who lived in a one-room shack with 8 other families, and every night they slept on the floor and there was 0 room between the bodies on the floor for people to walk because there were so many of them in that room, and they were considered the second happiest people in the world in this study. And when asked why they were so happy, they said, just look at all the people out on the street who've got nowhere to sleep.
I can still imagine that, but I mean, if you are like stressed all the time because you are raped and bombed and
yes.
shot
I
on, I mean,
get that. Yeah.
for example, then yeah.
So yeah, it is a tricky one, but what I'm saying is attitude plays a huge part in this kind of thing. So did those people who are the second happiest in the world suffer? Yeah, probably they did. But as well, though, they were happy. I've seen pictures of utter destitution and poverty in African villages, and yet you got these kids running around laughing and having a lot of fun, right, in amongst all of the mud and rubbish and everything else still. Yeah. But then, it took me quite a few years to to no longer suffer about all the shit that goes on in the world. And in the beginning, it was to do with me telling myself a story that just like when you get diarrhea and vomiting after you get food poisoning, that's pretty unpleasant stuff, and that's the body going through a healing crisis, right? Getting rid of the toxins and so on. And so it goes through this unpleasant situation trying to heal up. And I used to think that all of the wars and other crap that was going on in the world, all of those people that suffering like that, was just part of Earth or the world going through a healing crisis. But that was kind of a bit of rationalization in that. It was me telling myself a story to feel better about it. Um, what where I've come to now is not a denial or a suppression of that stuff, but just an acceptance of the inevitability of the existence of it. So it is, and again, it's the attitude towards it. You know, I wouldn't want to be in it. I don't want those people to be. I mean, it's heart-wrenching to think what the people of Gaza are going through at the moment, you know, or the people in Ukraine and a lot of places in the world, you know. Yet today we have less wars going than we've ever had in the world, and so on and so on. But it's really a case of accepting the inevitable. It's just what it is, what it is, what it is, and no matter how I feel about it, it's not going to change it. Accepting it.
Yeah, I mean, my story would be like, I don't know, if an extraterrestrial is watching this planet and just neutrally describing what is happening, then it might be the same as us, like looking at a state of ants or something like that. And then they would probably say, like, yeah, we observed them over the centuries, and violence and wars seem to be a mechanism that
Yeah.
is part of the system or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
if they lived for 1,000 years, they would go, "Oh yeah, they're getting there. You know, maybe another 1,000 or 2,000 years,
mm,
but who knows? You know." But if they live for 100 years, they'll go, "Well, not much has changed." You know, so it depends on the perspective again, doesn't it?
It brings up a question for me that I've considered before. Does anything actually exist if it's not right here? And like, you know, when I worry about my stepdaughter or friends or
Yeah. So a lot
you
of
know,
that, the answer to that question is again, it's all relative, you know. So from a relative perspective, the only thing that exists is our current experiencing. You know, from an absolute perspective, well, you know, the Statue of Liberty exists, but I don't know it. It's not part of my experience. It's just a thought idea at the moment, you know.
well, I'd say it's the other way around. That the absolute is, you might be saying the same thing. Sorry if I've misheard. The absolute is there's only what exists here, and the relative is what we imagine is happening outside of here.
Yeah, no, my personal story about it is the other way around to that. The relative is what is relative to me, to my experience. The absolute is what I can't know about. It's what's out there.
yeah, anyway, I can only know about military conflicts that someone makes a documentary about. So
Yeah. And if you
it
watch
is
those
anyway.
documentaries, you can relate to the documentary and
Mm,
will have you whatever response you have to them, you know. So yeah. So it's crazy, isn't it? You know, all these people that watch idiots on Fox News, for example, you know, it's like that's self-inflicted suffering that they're going to get out as a result of that. Watch the right-wing shock jocks, you know, they feel like they're getting some good value out of that, but they're really getting off on suffering, aren't they? It's just, well, that's my attitude anyway. Yeah.
yeah, it was. I mean, it's still a story, but somehow, yeah, I felt like if we think about the human experience, then for most of the humans, it's not the problems that I have or seem to have, you know.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. If we compare
I,
ourselves, then
yeah,
we have trivial problems compared to others, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I googled between thought and imagination because I'm lazy. And does anybody want to hear the answer? Because it's brilliant.
It's always interesting to hear what others come up with. Yeah.
Imagination is the ability to form a mental image of something that is not present or has not been experienced. while thoughts can be ideas that enter the mind with or without reflection. Albert Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge because it embraces the entire world, while knowledge is limited to what is currently known and understood. And then about brain activity, and I thought that was brilliant from Einstein. Brain activity, imagination involves many parts of the brain, including areas responsible for vision, emotion, senses, reasoning, speech, and nerve impulses.
And does it say what happens in the brain for thought?
No, that I suppose that first part is saying, I don't know, is saying it's kind of different from thought, isn't it? So it's not really going into thought. There's another bit here, I haven't read this. The difference between imagination and thinking is that imagination is a creative process that uses the imagination to generate ideas and think outside the box, which is so true. While thinking is an analytical process that involves using logical reason and using facts and evidence to come to a conclusion.
Yeah.
That really says a lot for me because I don't use that creative part of my mind much now, and I think it would perhaps be really useful for me because I've become too analytical.
Yep.
Not too, but you know what I mean? It's
Okay, I'm still not convinced that they're separate or that they're different. They're all part of a spectrum, and certainly the analytical thinking might use the prefrontal cortex of the brain more, but I can't imagine that you could use that part exclusively and not involve some of the other parts as well. But we don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying I know what I know is what I know. It's just that my experience, my idea is that imagination is just one end of a spectrum of thinking, and analytical thought is the other end of the spectrum of thinking.
yeah. Well, it sounds to me like left brain thinking is analytical and right brain thinking, which is more pleasurable, is creative.
Yes.
And obviously we've got to work together.
Yeah.
Just have one or the other, but you
But
kind
left
of
brain can be
out.
more than just analytical. It can be also very judgmental.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, the right side is notably more pleasurable than the left side. And the right side looks at the bigger picture and is more expansive, and the left side is really contracted.
I go
And
along.
both sides are useful, but in conjunction. But if you're practicing one side of the brain and not the other side of the brain, then you're going to be a bit tight.
Well, I expect a balance would be a good thing. That's right. Yeah. Or the more use more. And I think that's one of the things that happens with this kind of stuff as we whatever you want to call it, as we get better at this stuff, we tend to use more of our everything. We certainly experience more emotions. The filters come off and we experience, more emotion. And I think, who knows?
And I think with this path journey, whatever this life on this meeting, it's taught me to practice more. It hasn't taught me, but I'm doing more seeking, and I think that's left brain. Whereas I'm happier when seeking drops, and that's the right brain, and that's more.
Yeah. So you might even imagine that left brain then involves the concept of time a lot more.
Yeah.
Speaking
So
is
all
about the future
brains, all the processing and analytical, judging, criticizing, and the negative, not negative, but the me and the feelings and the hurt and the sense of me and selfishness and my, whereas the right brain's more creatively thinking and expansive and loving and caring.
Yep.
And enlightened, I suppose.
Yep.
In a sense.
Yeah. Thank you, Jill Taylor Bolte. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading that book. I didn't want you to think it was my knowledge, but I didn't want to.
No, that was good.
The reason I didn't want to mention the book is because it wasn't my idea to read it, and it was Kelly's idea, and Kelly's given me a great gift.
Oh, it's brilliant. I think it's lovely. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And I'm very grateful, Kelly. Full Brain Living, brilliant book.
I'm just looking at the clock here and it's 10 past midnight and I've got to get up in 4.5 hours for the next meeting. So I'm going to go to bed now.
Thanks for a good meeting. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Vince.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.